Welcome to BitBoy Crypto, the largest cryptocurrency channel on all the interwebs and also one of the most fun. My name is TJ, and I'll be your host for today's episode of Around the Blockchain. Every weekday, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we come to you guys live with some of our favorite people and personalities from around the blockchain to discuss the trending crypto topics of the day, as well as get into some of your most asked questions. Got a really good show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about Apple and PayPal potentially getting more involved in cryptocurrency. We've got Kraken talking about an ICO and some of the biggest outflows we've seen from exchanges since, you guessed it, the last all-time high and prices going up with Bitcoin. So real quick, we'll jump into it. We got the fastest talker in all the West, CryptoJebb, joining us here today. We've got, he sounds like Vision, he is a Vision with that lighting, Spencer Tarring down there in the bottom corner, and Andrew Money Mo with us today, joining us, and the one and only Ben Armstrong, just fresh off of the massage, feeling relaxed, got a lot to tell us. So it's gonna be.
You gotta preface that, okay? It was athletic massage, okay? I'm obviously athletic.
Oh yeah,
I think
okay.
The chiropractor, okay? When you say massage, people get weird vibes. Okay?
People do.
Yeah.
People do. But
I
as
got
always,
weird vibes when you said it.
feeling
I was
defensive.
there.
Little defensive, huh? Okay.
A little bit.
All right, so as you guys know, if you've seen the show before, we've got a score box in the bottom right-hand corner. If you like what you hear from any of the guests, drop a +1 in the chat, and we'll know to give them a point. Whoever has the most points at the end of the episode will have 30 seconds to give their parting thoughts. As always, the links is in the description below, so please go give these channels a like and a subscribe. Show them that BitSquad love. They all have really good context and perspective on the market, and you guys can all learn a lot from them. So real quick, we're going to do something new today, try a little lightning round. You guys will have 15 seconds. I just want to hear how are your gut feeling on the markets are right now, bullish or bearish, and why, in 15 seconds or less. We'll start with you, Jebb. Go.
All right, so Bitcoin went into a massive downtrend. It's trading sideways. We have an inverse head and shoulders pattern. The MACD is about to cross bullish. The volume's still high. The fundamentals are strong. Keep your eye on the prize, and don't forget that Bitcoin is still Bitcoin.
Perfect.
Bullish.
All right, Andrew, let's go.
Holy moly. Okay, well, what the heck? Well, I can't follow up with that. MACD, let's go to convergence. I would say that I'm very bullish, and I'm not a bull. I'm a proper ape. And that's the reason why I think that I'm a proper ape. So overall, the market looks absolutely beautiful, and not just the crypto market. The AMC crowd saw a 50% rise today, and that is already looking sharply at a elevated attempt to be able to bring the price action up with BTC and the rest of the crypto market as well. So I'm very bullish for all of that.
Oh, good point. And Spencer, what's your take?
I think that all crypto is all tied together, obviously mainly tied towards Bitcoin, but I'm mainly bullish because I think ETH 2.0 coming out at the end of the year, or maybe in Jan 2022, is going to be a big factor on the entire crypto market. So I'm bullish until that is out.
Yeah, a lot of big stories about Ethereum out today. And then Ben, bullish or bearish?
I think I'm going to say bearish for 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
We traditionally see, I don't like to say it, especially since we're at 38,000 right now, but I would say tomorrow is the close of the monthly futures contracts, and we've generally seen bearish action on those days. So we could see a retest of 36K over the next 24 to 72 hours, and then hopefully on Monday we are back in full force.
Yeah, and let's spend a little time talking about the markets right now. That was actually, I'm glad you said that. The futures contracts expiring tomorrow, last Friday in May. Sometimes those get rolled forward into June. So I want to hear from you, Jebb. How much of an effect do you think we're going to see from that tomorrow?
Yeah, so historically, whenever options contracts and futures contracts have expired, depending on the size of those options contracts and those futures contracts, there's been a massive correction. A lot of times that'll happen because these players that are in these trades are losing money, and it results in big selling on the market. This is something that so to answer that question, we really have to define what technical analysis is. It's simply the ability to look at certain trends and then use those trends with some probability to predict into the future. So what we see is that throughout history, whenever this happens at the end of the month, generally speaking, it causes a small downtrend. We're about to see it happen again. This is something that normally happens. We would expect the same thing to happen again, right? In this case, I totally agree with you, Ben. I actually think the next couple of days might be bearish. What I was saying earlier is that I think we're bullish in the next couple of months. The next couple of days, though, are still very much up in the air because of exactly what you're talking about with these options contracts and futures contracts expiring. I think it's something that people need to watch out for, but I also think it's something that people don't need to put too much weight on, because at the end of the day, normally the price action that comes from these contracts expiring is not something that's going to last more than a week. It is something that will color that week. But after that, the fundamentals and the technicals are obviously going to take back over. So don't put too much weight on it. Don't overemphasize it. But it's definitely one of those points that you want to keep on your radar.
Yeah, it's definitely a great short-term indicator. Andrew, how much
Yep.
emphasis do you put on futures contracts? You mentioned the GME price pumping up, and that was a result of a lot of a short squeeze. So how much do you look at that in the crypto markets?
So one of the things that I mainly pay attention to is the connection between, originally it was inverse between GME and Bitcoin. Oftentimes we want to be able to take a look at what short whales are doing when it comes down to selling off their main potential of fatty cows. And I always talk about fatty cows when these short potentials, these heavily shorted stocks like AMC and GME are about to hit the high burner, as in the huge run AMC has seen, historical highs, beat its January gamma squeeze. We don't like to say short squeezes have happened because short squeezes are coerced buying when the shorts start to cover. And so with Ortex data, we know that that's not yet happened. So one of the first things that I want to pay attention to is whether or not Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto markets start to see a slide. And if that does happen, we can start assuming that margin calls are happening with these smaller hedge funds that maybe have diversified into the crypto market, but those larger ones that have been hedging against the fattier cows like Tesla, like the rest of the EV industry and the crypto market overall, those are going to be harder giants to fall. But we know that giants do bleed. And that said, we're looking for a major day for tomorrow.
Really? Okay, big day for tomorrow. Spencer, do you think we could see a really big day tomorrow, or do you think we're going to see some chop over the weekend and then start blasting off in June?
If I was to be totally honest, I am a much longer term investor when I come to Bitcoin and crypto. So my day trading experience and what I'm looking for in investing my capital is not so important to me. But one thing I wanted to mention about the market, if we compare this to the last cycle of 4 years ago, the differences in the market, there's a few key things. And obviously we've now got a lot more institutional money in the market, which I think is helping to lower the volatility. These institutions are less likely to have their finger on the sell button, I think, in my opinion. Obviously, you've got some actively trading, but the biggest difference is you've got huge amount of leverage available now in the market, and that's affecting both liquidity and these massive effects when we get downturns and liquidations of these contracts, which people basically are totally overextended and just basically over leveraged. And I would say that the effect of the leverage that's available in the market is stronger than the kind of lowering of the volatility by the institutional money. So yeah, I mean, short term, again, I'm not that focused on the market. I look 3 to 4 months in advance, and I'm still bullish on Bitcoin. So I'm not really concerned about the next couple of days.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if we are projecting out a little bit further than just the weekend, we're starting to see some indicators that the momentum is shifting. We've seen the inflows actually I think it was just today, on April 22nd, I'm sorry, is when the inflows surpassed the highest it's been. Basically, the inflows were at the highest they ever were on April 22nd. That was the last time we had an all-time high, or pretty close to all-time high, I think 55K for Bitcoin at that point. Now we're seeing, then we saw on the bearish day, May 14th, the inflows were insane, meaning Bitcoin being deposited onto exchanges. Now we're seeing Bitcoin being withdrawn from exchanges en masse starting just recently. Do we think as those outflows continue, is that some of these larger investors preparing for what will be a good price uptick in the next couple of months? Ben, what's your take on that?
I want to know where they're moving it to. That's what I'm wondering. You got all these people that are doing these. It sounds like a lot of extra work. I don't know what they're doing. Just if you're going to eventually dump it, just keep it on there. You know what I mean? But I'm being serious, though, to some extent. All of these outflows are going to, what are they? Is this all going to cold storage? If it's going to cold storage, then it's probably going to sit around for a while. Are they just moving ETH over to a MetaMask so they can move it back? Then that's pretty easy. It's just going to cost them a tiny gas fee. But generally, we do know that when money is flowing into When money is flowing into the markets, or not into the markets, but into exchanges, that means people are preparing to sell. When it's flowing off of exchanges, the outflow, we know that generally that means that people are becoming longer term holders. The really interesting thing to me watching all these outflows and inflows has been the extreme volatility that we've seen between the two. When we've had these days where the inflows were record setting and the outflows were record setting, it's a dramatic amount of volume that's moving compared to the days kind of around that, right? It's like all of a sudden nothing, like just normal numbers. Whoa, inflow super high. Yeah, a massive spike. Then on the other side, it's the same way. And that's generally the same way you can track whale movement on regular trading volume, is to see those spikes that are kind of out of nowhere, because that says they're like everybody's trading at an equilibrium, but there's some coordination with some whales to say now's the time. So, I definitely think that there's a lot of significance to this. Obviously, we hope that the outflows continue to go up and the inflows kind of stay stagnant.
Right, and just for those of you that at home, if there's less Bitcoin on exchanges and a lot of it being purchased, that's good for the price. That means the supply is getting tighter, the scarcity is going up, which obviously with supply and demand will send the price up. But Jebb, I know you spend a lot of time looking at Glassnode and some of these charts and stuff. Yep. What have you seen that kind of gives you indicators of what to expect over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so we actually covered this on our morning show a couple of days ago about how the number of long-term holders right now, I forget the exact statistic, but I want to say that it's at a record high. I might be wrong on that, but I know that what we covered was that there is a massive increase in people holding on to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for the long term. It's those long-term hodlers. It's the people that have taken, it's the wallets, that have taken payments but are not sending out payments. It's the people that are receiving Bitcoin and holding it. That number is just continuing to increase, and it hasn't been slowed down by this correction. We've seen that number continue to steadily increase over the entire history of Bitcoin, but especially over the last 12 months. The number of wallets that are sitting on long-term holdings for Bitcoin is going up. And to your point, TJ, whenever you take supply out of a market and the demand is going up, as we can see in the news and the media, your channel's growing a lot, Ben, our channel's growing a lot, crypto's growing a lot, more people are demanding Bitcoin. The supply is going down, because if it's in a cold wallet, they can't sell it. So if it's on exchange, it is basically in circulating supply, and if it's not on exchange, it might as well not be. The number of people taking money out of the market, if you will, is only going up. And that's a very good sign, because it means that not only is Bitcoin's stock-to-flow ratio going up, that's simply the ratio of how long would it take with current production to replace the current supply measured in years. So a 100 stock-to-flow ratio is, it would take 100 years at current input to recreate current stocks. Our stock to flow ratio is only going up in effect by having more people pull out their money from exchanges. There are all kinds of statistics. I can't cite them right off the top of my head. You can find them on Glassnode. They have to do with long-term holding. But yeah, that increasing is one of the best signs of Bitcoin adoption, because Bitcoin was designed to be a digital cash that was scarce, that had a limited supply to fight inflation. That's the entire reason Bitcoin's in existence, lest we forget that. And the fact that there are people taking that off of exchange is a big deal for anyone holding Bitcoin in the long run. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, great points. And speaking of exchanges and things like that, you mentioned Coinbase several times. We want to kind of shift gears into this discussion here. The day that Coinbase had its IPO was actually the all-time high for the price of Bitcoin. So Ben was saying, I'm curious who these people are that are moving all this stuff around. What incentive do these people have for long-term holding, or is there any manipulation going on here? But now we've got Kraken coming out talking about an IPO as well. We know a lot of these big organizations within crypto, they've been involved a long time. They've got a lot of Bitcoin. They could be some of these whales that are moving this stuff around. Andrew, do you think it's any coincidence that the Bitcoin price was at an all-time high the day that Coinbase IPO'd?
I remember that live stream super well. In fact, I think that Jebb was so articulate that I don't think I can outspeak him. Let's see if Professor April has something to say.
Oh
man, your dog is so cute.
Points for the puppy.
You just won around the blockchain. Points for the puppy.
They love the dog in the chat.
He's a little bit shy. I'll give him a treat. I'll give myself a treat too.
Oh, look at that.
So what I'm going to say is that one of the first things about IPOs, especially when it came to Coinbase, is that do not mess up your precious tendies when it comes down to these volatile price expectations. When it comes down to it, Coinbase was a absolute bomb waiting to explode. But when it came down to inversely affecting when the price of Coinbase inevitably plummeted, but the price of Bitcoin started to accumulate in terms of speculation, that was something that was also now in afterthought a clear inverse relationship because of how Coinbase propped up the expectation that one of these ETFs, if not Riot blockchain or something else similar to that, would ultimately affect the cryptos underlying those ETFs. And that's one of the major things that you have to consider when it comes back to trying to connect bullish momentum in the crypto market with bullish momentum in the stock market, something that I try to make a fine balance of over on my show, making it clear that when you do have these bullish runs for certain cryptos, that does not necessarily mean that we have the same factor when it comes to the stock market. And oftentimes it is an inverse relationship, which we saw with Coinbase there.
Yeah, good point.
2 tweets from Meatball.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. So, Spencer, do you think Coinbase has had any incentive to prop up the price there, or do you think the coin, the stock ticker that's been falling ever since they IPO'd and the price has been going down, do you think that's connected, or do you think they just are completely independent?
Well, there's a few things here in play. I think the guys at Coinbase are obviously they're not stupid, are they? And they've timed their IPO extremely well. It's not. I mean, it's not totally difficult to get a range of making sure you're in a bull run when you're doing the IPO. You know it's going to be a certain amount of time after the halving for Bitcoin. We've seen that 3 or 4 times since the inception of Bitcoin. So I think they've just taken that and taken a kind of gauge of, right, we need to IPO around this time, and then the IPO has helped to raise up the price of Bitcoin. And I actually think that that's one of the reasons why we had a bit of an over acceleration of the price, and why I feel, and maybe some other people feel as well, that Bitcoin was kind of ahead of where it should have been. We were too high, too quick, too soon, giving rise to the idea that we're not at the end of this bull run. It's just kind of a correction, albeit kind of like an overextended one, because Coinbase has pumped up the price of Bitcoin by going public and enabling enabling Bitcoin as a real asset class. Now, one other thing I want to say is that I kind of liken the Coinbase IPO to the Facebook IPO. I don't know if you guys remember when Facebook went to IPO. I think they IPO'd around $40, and immediately after Facebook IPO'd, they crashed down to around $20. I think it was. It went as low as almost $20. I think it was $22 or something like this. And everyone's like, "Oh, I've totally overpaid for Facebook, etc., etc., etc." And now we look at the price. I think Facebook's way 10 times that price, and that's only 4 or 5 years, or 5 or 6 years ago. So I liken Coinbase to Facebook. I think the coming of age of the internet and the coming of age of crypto and Bitcoin, I still think Coinbase is a buy long term.
Yeah, no, and you made several really good points there. One of the things you mentioned, this is something, Ben, you and I have talked about a little bit, is, like you said, it's not hard for these people that have been around crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin for years and years and years to predict when these bull markets are coming. They've seen, like you said, we've seen it cycle through several times after the Bitcoin halving. So we're seeing a lot of big announcements that come out in the bull market. Ben, do you think we're going to see a lot more coming soon as the hype continues to increase? We're going to start to just hear announcements left and right from every big crypto organization out there that just fuels the mania? Or do you think we've kind of seen some of the biggest stuff yet?
We haven't seen anything yet. And I mean, this is more evidence of how we know that this was not the top of the market. Because, yeah, Coinbase IPO, great, big news, yada, yada, yada. We know that was right before we had the all-time high of 64K. We knew that was coming. We knew they were going to pump the price. But we've not seen the retail mania. And the retail mania is led by these big announcements from these companies. When you go back and you look at 2017 at the top of the market and you saw, I mean, what was the exact top of the market for Bitcoin? It was the announcement of the CBOE futures at that time, which have actually gone belly up. They don't even have CBOE futures now. The CME is taking it over. But the fact is, once this lawsuit versus Ripple is dropped, and I think it's going to be dropped. I mean, I had some people messaging me on Telegram saying, that basically the guy who stepped down, the attorney who stepped down from the Ripple case for the SEC today, did it because I don't know how this makes sense, but the idea was because they're ready to turn up the heat and they made him step down because he's not doing a good job. I don't know if that's true or not, but Ripple's already said after this lawsuit is dismissed, basically, or settled, that they're going to be doing their own IPO. I mean, if you think there was a lot of hype for Coinbase, wait until that XRP army gets a whiff of an IPO.
Oh.
It's going to go absolutely insane, regardless of whether, the centralization problems, with Ripple you care about or not. But the fact is, we're going to see company after company. And when all of this stuff starts coming out, I've thought for a long time that basically the stock market was going to have a lot to do with the end of this bull run whenever it does happen. So who knows, we might see some of these IPOs lined up to come, in the fall. And when they hit, maybe they flop, and maybe that has an effect on pulling the market down. But we're going to see so much. And we look, we talk to celebrities and athletes and, musicians. We talk to a lot of these people a good bit of the time, and they are still right in this, and they're still very interested. And there's a lot of big stuff coming. We're talking with a $1 billion company about crypto stuff with us. This is something that's only going to go, and this is when the retail mania is going to hit, when all these announcements are coming back to back to back, and then we'll get the blow off top, market will crash.
Yeah, and that brings up another good point. Like, it seemed like early in the year, February, March, or even kind of Q4 of last year, we started to hear a lot of stuff about Square adding support for Bitcoin, PayPal, which, Venmo's potentially adding support for Bitcoin very soon. And like a lot of these big companies that you mentioned moving towards the space, and it seemed like announcement after announcement. You had Tesla buying it in its treasury and other big companies adding it to their treasury. And then it seemed like on a dime, all of that news stopped and it went completely silent. Nobody was talking about that stuff anymore. And now we're starting to hear, whispers again. Apple, looking to do some hires to potentially be integrating some blockchain technology. So from Jebb, I want to hear from you. Do you think we're going to hit another cycle, kind of like Ben was alluding to, where we hear story after story after story of people getting involved, big billion-dollar companies getting involved with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, kind of like we were hoping with the Walmart story and what was the other big one that was supposed to be buying Bitcoin? Facebook. Yeah, Facebook. And then it turns out that they didn't. Do you think it was just kind of the regulation and the logistics of getting it done, and it just takes time to get this, and we'll hear it all at the end of Q2 in June, right at the peak? Or do you think, maybe that was the hype?
No, so look, I think a massive rally is about to come to Bitcoin. I've been saying this over on my channel. I think $30,000 is the bottom. I think we're consolidating here just below $40,000, waiting to break certain levels of resistance, like the 20 weekly exponential moving average. We're looking for a daily chart recovery on the MACD. We're looking for this whole death cross that everybody's freaked out about to go away, which I don't think is going to happen, but I don't think that the cross itself is going to happen. Technically speaking, the chart looks like it's trying to rally to the upside, but fundamentally speaking, what we're seeing right now is that there, like you said, has just been radio silence from the mainstream media talking about Bitcoin, talking about adoption of these major companies. I don't know. I can't shout manipulation or anything, but it is interesting. I think that we're starting to see that reverse. We're talking about Apple here. I know that's in the document, and we've been talking about that over on our channel also. This news, it's speculation, broke yesterday. It's news with speculation attached to it, I should say. Yep. There is news that Apple is looking for certain manager positions with expertise in cryptocurrency. By the way, in case you don't realize why that's a big deal, I will tell you. What Apple stands for, what Apple believes in, and now there's a big argument about whether or not Apple is still this, but what Apple was at least founded on was the idea of the individual. It was founded on the idea of quality and innovation, and it was founded on the idea of challenging the status quo. And I'm not even an Apple guy. I have an Android phone. I'm sitting on a Dell laptop, but I respect the brand, right? Steve Jobs wanted to challenge status quos. Steve Jobs wanted to challenge IBM. They were the little guy. They were the underdog. They were the people using new technology to take on the giant and the system, the man that was taking charge of the world at that time. Does that sound familiar to you? It's really interesting to me that Apple hasn't already stepped into the cryptocurrency space because that is the exact ethos of cryptocurrency. I think it's inevitable. So the question is not, in my opinion, where is Apple? Is Apple coming? I think the question is, why hasn't Apple already stepped into the cryptocurrency space? And when they do, what kind of effect will that have on crypto? So to answer that question, what I think is the cause of that is Apple has always not been the first mover Now sometimes they have been, but a lot of times, especially in the last 20 years, Apple has released a high quality product and not been the first mover because they wanted to get it really, really good. So it makes sense to me that they haven't come out and jumped on the bandwagon as quickly as PayPal has or as quickly as Tesla has, because they love getting things right and it launches and they're the best. They love that idea of quality. So I think Apple is going to be moving into the cryptocurrency space in a massive way over the next couple of years. And when that starts to take place, it is going to cause Bitcoin to rally to the moon, along with a plethora of other factors. We're also seeing other big giants stepping into cryptocurrency. There's a lot of things going on with miners moving to America. There are so many pieces moving right now. I think the fundamentals are really starting to pick back up. We're seeing a billionaire named Icon stepping into the cryptocurrency or saying that he might be stepping into the cryptocurrency space with between a $1 to $1.5 billion investment. Facebook, quite frankly, didn't buy in Q1, but for all we know, they bought in Q2. That's complete speculation. We're seeing big names moving into crypto. And forgive me, I forgot who it was. Someone that I was on the show here with, I think it might have been Rice, was talking about how large companies, it takes time for them to buy Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Absolutely. We just saw Saylor talking to all of these big names, all these executives about cryptocurrency. They can't just get into it right away. You got to convince the board. You got to convince the executives. You got to convince the shareholders. There is a big institutional move coming to Bitcoin. And the reason I say this is because I don't want anyone to get scared about the price and forget the long-term prize, because I really do think the rally for Bitcoin that's going to come over the next 12 months is going to be huge. And yes, like Ben said, there's going to be a big blow off top and we're going to crash. That's how it always happens. But we haven't seen that true hype cycle happen yet, but I think it is coming.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And kind of like what you were saying too about Apple, if they bought Q1 or Q2, we have to remember a lot of these big companies are extremely strategic, and if they plan to continue to buy and accumulate, it could have been simply a strategy choice. If you're looking like, do we force this in March, or do we wait for it to tick over and get into Q2 where we know we won't have to disclose it all the way until June? It gives us the entire quarter to accumulate without anybody knowing what we're doing, versus just doing one buy and then being on everybody's radar, which is kind of like what Tesla did, and then they maybe were kind of regretted everybody knowing right off the rip, because they were instantly under the spotlight. Everybody knew their buy position, and they kind of had to defend it a little bit. But Andrew, I want to hear from you when it comes to custody. We have another story here about PayPal adding withdrawals from Bitcoin withdrawals to self-custody wallets. And I know a lot of people, especially newer people coming into the cryptocurrency space, they hear content creators say, oh, don't use Robinhood, you need to get off Robinhood, or don't use things that don't allow you to withdraw. What's your take on that? Do you think that's really important, or do you think new people understand the importance of custody versus custodial ownership?
I don't think people do, but that's okay. Because first of all, if you're on Robinhood, I'm sorry. And this is a visual expectation of what is going to happen to your money, is that your money is going to fall away, and then you're going to be on the rocket, and everyone else is going to be on the rocket, and you're not going to have any of this. So this is going to go over there. The main point, now that I visually have your attention, the main point that I'm trying to make here is that when people have an easy barrier to entry, then expectations start to really corrupt the actual premise of how much money can you really make. And that was the problem with a lot of the squeeze potential in January for the GME and the AMC craze, but also what happened inversely with 2 weeks ago when AMC finished an at-the-market offering. So let me just make a anecdotal example of what could happen with China saying that, we're not going to accept these cryptos. These cryptos are like X, Y, and Z bad for our policies that we want to instill. Fair enough, right? We want to be able to have these governments slowly come on. I think Jebb mentioned a lot of great things when it comes to that. But when it actually ends up being it could have been much worse. I actually had the foresight to be able to jump in and buy a double in my position with Bitcoin and Ethereum over the weekend when Ethereum was like 1,800, Bitcoin was like 32. I felt pretty good about that because I expected worse. Right? I expected that there was going to be something that it was plummeting these crypto prices even more. And now that we've survived the storm, it's exactly the same as when AMC survived an at-the-market offering of like 43 million additional shares. Right? That's $500 million extra that AMC has to use to fight these hedges. But when it comes down to crypto, we've already started to consolidate the mining. Now that China has essentially denounced this entire technology, we have the ability to say, miners are going to be here and here. Just like Jebb said, we have the ability to say that centralized mining is is going to give us a little bit more stability in the price action moving forward, as well as the fact that this is the worst it gets. They just gave us the best Black Friday deal you can imagine. So when it comes back down to it, you are looking at brand new FOMO from people jumping into the new Robinhoods of the world like PayPal that want to be able to give you an easy access to the crypto markets. The only difference is that we're looking at the stock market as a clearinghouse disaster. Right, these clearinghouses with T+2 have to put up a lot of money in terms of what brokers need to bring to the table in order to even allow their participants to play. Crypto is going to be a different beast when it comes down to that, right? We're not questioning whether we should go from T+2 to T+1 like in Congress. We're actually mentioning, can we actually make it so that the stock market is more like the blockchain that crypto is already reliant on. So in that sense, we have more optimism when it comes to people jumping in, but with their lack of expertise of actually understanding, which of these channels to subscribe to and how to get their information that's not just mainstream FUD, that ends up being a little trickier beast. But they're fundamentally different equations when it comes to the stock market versus the crypto market.
Yeah, a lot of really good points there. Real quick, where do you tell new people if they've never bought Bitcoin before, where do you recommend they go to buy Bitcoin? Any go-to apps that you recommend?
Personally, I prefer BlockFi, but then I would plug my link in the affiliate links because you get 8.6% APY. So it's kind of like if you have a savings account, you're essentially throwing money away. That's slightly better than putting your money under your pillow or your mattress. But the best way is to get a crypto account that wants to pay you major buckaroos just for holding your money in stablecoin, in GUSD, for example, because that is tethered to the US dollar. So it is essentially, in essence, giving you 8% free interest. And that kind of interest is hardly seen in riskier investments like the stock market, but it's something that you can rely on, and you don't even have to play with Bitcoin or Ethereum and have to rally through these dips and rips.
Perfect. That was all great advice. Spencer, I want to hear a little bit from you, kind of going back to the discussion we were having with Apple. Do you see Apple becoming a major player with Bitcoin and potentially purchasing a lot of Bitcoin here in the near future? And how do you think they're going to approach this going forward?
Just first off, I wanted to just touch on BlockFi. I just wanted to say, I want people to just be very careful when it comes to these kind of platforms, because essentially you are giving an unsecured loan when you put your Bitcoin or your stable coins into these platforms. So people just need to be aware of that, be very careful, because sometimes these kind of things go wrong. If something goes wrong, that money is gone. So you just make sure you're not overexposed on these platforms. Anyway,
make sure you really trust the company you're investing with. Yeah.
And if they send if they send you 20 extra Bitcoin, maybe.
Oh yeah, that might. Well, I mean, you're in it for the lottery, I guess.
Yeah.
So with regards to Apple, now obviously I'm a big Apple fanboy. I love Apple products. I've been using their products since the first iPhone. I've got all of their laptops, everything. Now, obviously, when Steve Jobs came up with the kind of branding and the idea and the concept of what Apple was, he wanted to create a closed system, one that you couldn't kind of get out of. You got stuck into their ecosystem. That's kind of all to do with their product stickiness. So for me, buying Bitcoin, or getting into cryptocurrencies, they have a number of advantages to them. First is the obvious, which is the inflation hedge. Apple, I think, they have billions of USD in the bank sitting there. I think they have one of the largest USD reserves of all the companies in America. So it's just a kind of a massive no-brainer for them to have a part of that in Bitcoin, just in case we're right. But for me, the main upside for them when it comes to getting into cryptocurrencies is creating stickiness on their devices. So for instance, your iPhone, you have your photos, you have your email, you have your contacts, you have everything on there. So you don't, when it comes to kind of moving to Android, you kind of I don't really want to do it because I've kind of got all this stuff. It's a lot of hassle to move it. Now imagine that you've got a hardware Bitcoin wallet built into an Apple device, and the stickiness of that product, it goes up tenfold. You're never going to ever leave that ecosystem. And what that does is it brings on this ability to enable people that don't really know much about Bitcoin to have additional trust in buying it and feeling more comfortable because they've got another reputable brand who's providing that solution for them. A bit like what Andrew mentioned and what Jebb mentioned, that once PayPal is there for people to buy it, people don't necessarily know how to use the internet, but they use it. It's the same for Bitcoin. People don't necessarily know about Bitcoin, but they still want to use it. And especially when you've got companies like PayPal and Revolut or Robinhood offering these services to buy it, regardless of whether it's a true holding of Bitcoin and the fact that you can remove it or not remove it, and it's not really ever in your wallet. I don't think people really care about that at the moment, or the majority of people don't really care about that. Just like the majority of people don't really care how the internet works. They just want to use it. And I think that's going to be the same for Bitcoin. So I think it's an obvious move. Like Jebb said, it's a matter of why haven't they done it already? And yeah, I think it's a second mover advantage that they're going to have when they come in. And I think it's going to be in the form of a hardware wallet integrated into your iPhone.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good take, and you hit the nail on the head with several of those points there, that the ease of use is one of the most important things, and the user experience is probably one of the biggest missing pieces right now in blockchain products and applications. So having a company like Apple, who their whole thesis and business and mindset is designed around user experience and very clean, very easy, just pick it up and it works. Having that approach to crypto apps could be something that has a really big impact. I want to ask you one more thing while we're on this subject. Do you think, you mentioned Square, we're in Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, and now Apple with Apple Pay. Do you think we're starting to see a changing of the guards with tech companies, but will be the major payment processors in the future with things like Samsung Pay, Apple Pay versus Visa and MasterCard right now? Do you think, like with that integration, if they were to integrate a hardware wallet, it connects real easy with Apple Pay, you just use your phone to pay, you don't need a Visa or MasterCard anymore? Do you think we're going to start to see some transitions there?
Well, it's all driven by user demand, isn't it? So these banks don't necessarily want to do crypto, but they have to do crypto because if they don't do it, their customers go to the next bank that is doing the crypto. So the same goes for these tech companies. When PayPal add it, everyone else has got to add it, because if they don't, they're going to lose out business. And there's a number of articles on how much business improved for PayPal. I think the statistic was that people, since they started adding crypto, people log into PayPal twice as much as they did before they had crypto. It's a huge uplift, a huge upside to being involved in it. So yeah, I think you have to have it. You have to be involved in the market when the market demands it.
Great points all the way around. Ben, do you think the competition of some of these major tech players in the past, kind of like what Spencer was alluding to, is going to really fuel good innovation in crypto and blockchain moving forward?
No, not really. I don't. I think that a lot of your people that are developing in blockchain, they're already in blockchain. And if these companies have people who innovate for them, they're coming from other blockchain projects. You know, they're internal people that they bring in to innovate new stuff. I mean, I think we're going to see more of a merging of technology that already exists out there in blockchain, more like you see with Facebook's model, right? Facebook's model is, hey, that's a great tech company, let me buy it. Right. You know, I think we're going to see a lot of these larger tech companies see a crypto project or a crypto company that works, and they're going to say, come under our umbrella. And then, so in a roundabout way, like, yeah, of course, there's going to be innovation coming from those companies, but these people are already behind the 8 ball. Steve Jobs is dead, and Apple is the system now. And that's the problem. So,
yep.
You want to talk about who's evil out there right now? I mean, sure, I use Apple, but it's once again, kind of like Spencer said, it's just because that's where all my stuff is. That's the easiest. I don't want to switch. There's nothing really innovative coming out of Apple these days. I only use it for continuity purposes, and because it's easy and I know how to use it. That's the only reason I use Apple products. But what they're doing by trying to like FUD crypto, I think that, look, here's the thing. Think about this. Every time we've had a major industrial revolution, okay, in the history of the world, in the history of business, I would say. So, I mean, we go back, back to the first industrial revolution that was, like, I think in the early 1800s, whenever it was. Then you look at the automobile revolution, you look at the internet boom, the dot-com boom, you look at, different times throughout history. Every time we have one of these big revolutions, the companies that are at the top after the revolution are different than the ones that are at the top going into it. And so, yeah, that's what Apple was predicated on, was being that kind of up and comer, but their time has come. Their time has come, and it's time to see new companies take over. And I think the Cardanos and the Ethereums and the Binances and the Coinbases, these are the new big boys in the space. These are the new big boys in business, and that's where the innovation is going to happen at.
I like that. So you don't see a changing of the guards of payment processes, more just the changing of the guards as the major tech innovators in general, like the Facebooks, the Apples, Google potentially.
Facebook is going to be on the way out. There's no once we start understanding decentralization and people really start figuring it out. You know, these companies that we all hate them. Think about it. We all hate Apple. We all hate Google. We all hate Facebook. Netflix, not so much. You know, like Tesla's starting to get up there for sure with the stuff that's been going on lately with them. But who knows? They could be our Bitcoin mining savior. You know, he may have a savior complex, that Elon. But, you know, I think that what we're going to see is we all hate these companies and we're going to oust them. And we're going to have new innovators. Every time you think you're too big to fail, then you have a weak spot. And I think that's what we're going to see for these companies. We all hate them. Let's get them the F out of here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And this is there's a whole other wave that is yet to really kind of unleash on the general public, which is kind of the DAO cycle that I don't know if we'll experience in this bull cycle, but I think maybe next time around, 4 or 5 years from now, we really start to see DAOs really kind of hit the mainstream and people get their heads around them. And some of those decentralized autonomous organizations can blow up and do some really amazing things. So that's all we have time for today, guys. We really appreciate everybody joining us. That was some really good discussion, some really great guests. It looks like we've got Spencer with our top score today as our winner. So take it away, Spencer. You've got 30 seconds to leave the audience with your parting message.
Thank you very much for tuning in and watching. If you don't know about my channel, you're not subscribed, please go check it out. I'm doing weekly giveaways. I've got one being announced on Monday. You get a chance to win some BNB. I'd really appreciate that. And thank you to you guys for having me on here. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping to come back regularly. And yeah, I'm lucky I didn't swear this week, so no point deduction.
Yeah, no, you did great. All of the guests did a really good job. As always, the links are in the description below. Please go subscribe to Spencer's channel, as you mentioned, and all of these guys. They've got really, really good stuff to say. You'll learn a lot from them. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time. That's all we have for today. We're out.